Welcome to the channel and welcome to my review of Codex Grey Knights. This one goes up on pre-order on the 5th of August and gets released on the 12th of August. And I know what you're all thinking. Does it contain Primaris Space Marines? And the answer is no. The Grey Knight Armory does not contain any brand new models, but they do have access to some of the stuff that was previously exclusively available to other Space Marine chapters like the Flyers. One last thing, I want to thank Games Workshop for giving some of us YouTubers some advanced copies of these books. Because they did that, I signed an NDA, so I can't go into every single thing in this book. I'm sure they'll get very upset. Standard review. I'll try and cover as much as I can. I'll try and walk as close to the line as I can. So let's dive in. So as with your usual codex, it starts off with lots of narrative and gives you a very good idea exactly what the Grey Knights chapter 666 have been doing since the Cicatrix Maledictum ripped the galaxy in two. There's a nice bit of narrative in it which talks about Voldus, who ended up on Macragge and was instrumental in helping Ruwert Guilliman come back, why he was there, the procrastinators telling him exactly what was going on, telling him he needed to get back to Macragge and take part in that and then help Guilliman get all the way back to Terra to see Papa Emperor. All those details were in the Fallen Macragge books that came out. But the narrative in here, the narrative about the Grey Knights and the stuff that they've got about Drago and the part he will play in the upcoming war, or rather the war as it is right now, is quite significant. I do like these little bits. Lord Cawdor Drago, just two whole pages on the man, the myth, the legend himself. Where is that other bit that I was looking at? Look at this. Drago and Mortarion. They are linked after the coming the Cicatrix Maledictum, and I'm sure we'll see that their stories evolve and intertwine more as we go on. And then just as with the Codex Space Marines books, we've got breakdowns on every single one of the chapter entries. You can now get unit entries. Chaplains are a new thing for Grey Knights. Obviously there are no Grey Knight Chaplain models, so you buy your Chaplain model from Games Workshop and convert it up. Get a Grey Knight, stick a skull on him, and he becomes a Chaplain. So it's a nice little new addition that they didn't have access to before. Chaplains are a good HQ unit because they're relatively cheap and you can re-roll hits in every single round of combat. And Grey Knights do like hitting you in the face with their magic swords. So I can see Apothecaries definitely turning up in, not Apothecaries, Chaplains turning up in Grey Knight fights in the future. I think it's an interesting choice. Obviously people like to take Drago because he is such a beast. But for those lower point games, taking a Chaplain will be a thing. Nemesis Dreadnoughts, Land Raiders, gunships. So as you can see, Storm Raven gunships, which they already had. They now have Storm Talon gunships and Stormhawk Interceptors as well. Access to more gunships for your Grey Knight Armory. And here we have the new normal heavy metal type pages showing you some Grey Knight armies displayed. There's Voldus. I'm aware that he used to be in the Triumvirate set with Cypher and Guilliman, and now you can get him on his own. So if you want to get Voldus on his own, he's a really tasty psycho. Knows 3 psychic powers a turn, and there are 6 psychic powers in here to choose from. And his Warlord trait as well. So Drago has an auto Warlord trait which you have to give him, which allows him to smack demons a bit better. But his auto Warlord trait means he knows an extra psychic power. So Voldus knows 4 psychic powers. He still manifests 3, but he knows a lot more than he's letting on. And then we flip further into the pages. Here's some converted models. It's interesting, converted Chaplain, converted Brother Captain, that they're putting this inside their own codex. And to be fair, that is a pretty tasty conversion job there. Grey Knights shoulder pads there with a piece of Chaplain iconography hanging off of him. And here's some of the new flyers that you can get if you are a Grey Knight player. If you wanted a Stormhawk, if you wanted a Storm Talon, then you can now get them. There's a nice army layout. And then we delve into the rules, what everyone is looking for. The Army of Titan. Now these four main rules they had before in Index, in this book here, they had, and they shall know no fear, Demon Hunters, Rites of Banishment and Teleport Strike, and they're in here and they are unchanged. Not all the army has Teleport Strike, for example Dreadnoughts don't, but you have to look in the unit entry to see whether a model has Teleport Strike or not. And of course there's that 50% rule if you're playing match play games, which is you can't have more than 50% of your model in reserves. Rite of Banishment stays the same, Demon Hunters stay the same. This is the one which is, they can cast Smite, but it's only 12-inch range, only does 1 wound a pop. When I first read that I thought it would be a bit of a nerf. Having played Grey Knights 3 or 4 times in 8th edition, it's not a nerf. Having almost everything in their army going smite, 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 smite is a powerful tool, I can assure you. And then we dive into the new unit entries, or should I say rather the old unit entries, and Drago, Grandmaster Voldus and Grandmasters. As far as I can see at this time, none of this has changed. None of the special rules have changed. What has changed is now you can bring a Grandmaster in a Nemesis Dread Knight. It's only a couple of points more expensive. Let's check out how many points that is. Hang on a second. So 160 points for a Dread Knight and 190 points for a Grandmaster in a suit of Nemesis Dread Knight armor. What do you get for that extra 30 points? Because these stats, the wounds and the strength and the toughness is the same. Well, what you get is you get an increased weapon skill and ballistic skill and an increased leadership. He can also manifest 2 psychic powers as opposed to just the one that a normal Dread Knight can do. So if you want your Dread Knights a bit more shooty, then this is the guy who makes them a bit more shooty. Remember as well, because he's a Grandmaster, any units within 6 inches of him gets to re-roll hit rolls of 1, including him. So a ballistic skill of 2, this guy's hitting on 2s and re-rolling all the time. Give him guns, give him lots of guns, and he's hitting on 2s, re-rolling, hitting on 2s. If he moves, of course, because Dread Knight guns are heavy, he'll be hitting on 3s, but still re-rolling those 1s. And Dread Knights normally have a 5-up invulnerable save. This guy has a 4-up invulnerable save, so 30 points more. It's more resilient. Buffs your army, shoots better, attacks better, 30 points more. Yeah, Nemesis Dread Knight Grandmasters are coming, and he's also a HQ slot. So you can imagine if you get a spearhead detachment for your army, you could have just Nemesis Dread Knights, have a Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight as a HQ, or 2 of them, and then unlock a bunch of Nemesis Dread Knights and heavy support. Basically, you can run a whole army of baby carriers if you want to, charging forward into enemy lines. Not sure how tactically astute that might be, but it would look cool to see a whole army of Dread Knights charging forward, punching face, with psychic powers and invulnerable saves and all that sort of shenanigans, and access to all the stratagems and all the hot new goodness that Grey Knights now have. And of course, oh, that's one more thing, he's a character as well. Nemesis Dread Knights aren't characters, this one is a character, so he also has access to relics, which we'll get to in a second. As I say, Brother Captain Stearns, I believe these are unchanged. Tech Marines in here. The Tech Marine in Index Imperium was a bit confusing, the entry was at least. It's hard to find out whether the guy had a full servo harness or not. He's definitely got a full servo harness. I think it's 91 points. Looks like that. Comes with 4 wounds with a 2-up save. A cheap HQ, as far as cheap HQs go for well, that's before you add the guns actually. Relatively cheap for Grey Knights because most of the HQs are very expensive. There's the new Chaplains, Brother Champions, Terminator Squads, Strike Squads, Apothecaries, Ancients with banners, Paladin Squads. As I say, these data sheets I believe are unchanged from Index Imperium 1. Then we get up to Dreadnoughts and Venerable Dreadnoughts. Now, a couple of things. Beforehand, Dreadnoughts only knew Smite, but now This model can attempt to manifest one psychic power in each friendly psychic phase and attempt to deny a psychic power. It knows Smite and one psychic power from the Santic discipline. Same with Venerable Dreadnoughts. So your Dreadnoughts aren't just smiting it anymore. They can also do something else as well. You've lost the entry to have Rifle Dreads in this book, just as you'd lost the entry to have Rifle Dreads in the Codex Space Marine books. The options that you can take on your Dreadnoughts are Multi-Melter Plasma Cannon, Twin Las Cannon, and they start off with the Assault Cannon. So no more Rifle Dreadnoughts, unless you get this book here. And in the Imperial Armour indexes, you have Dreadnoughts, nice wolf, and then you have, trying to do this with only two hands, then you have the Mortis pattern Dreadnought, and it has the chapter entry. So change that chapter entry to chapter Grey Knights, and suddenly you have access to, where are they? Twin auto cannons one more time. So that's how I'm going to run them in my Space Marine army. I have got Grey Knights as well, but I haven't got any Grey Knight Dreadnoughts. Mike, who plays Grey Knights on the channel, you may have seen his army a few times, he loves his Rifle Dreads. So he's going to be picking the entry from this book here and giving them the Grey Knight chapter keyword. Mortis pattern Contemptor Dreads with twin autocannons. Your Rifle Dreads are a little bit more expensive in this book. I think they're 5 or 10 more points to load them out. But that's how you get access to your Rifle Dreads anymore. Because remember, if there isn't an entry in this book, you can take the entry from this book. There is a brother champion of the Grey Knights in here who looks like this. This is a model that Games Workshop used to make, because they don't make that model anymore. That entry is not in this codex. Any models that Games Workshop no longer make are in this codex, such as the Imperial Marine. If you want to use models in your collection that no longer exist, the Imperium books cover every single model that Games Workshop ever made. And Games Workshop has said quite clearly that if you've got some of these older models, if you're very, very old like I am, and you want to run them, take the entry out of there. If you want to run that brother champion, take the entry out of there. But in the codexes, so in the Grodex Codex, in the Space Marine Codex, in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, they're not going to include unit entries for models that the company no longer supports. So that's how you'll run units that don't exist in this book. However, if there is a unit entry like Dreadnoughts, this changes, this overrules the unit entry that was in here. So new unit entry is now overruled. That one, this one doesn't come with auto cannons on it. If you want your Rifle Dread, you need that book, or you need a mate who's got that book who can show you the unit entry and the points value of that book. So Rifle Dreads aren't dead, and that's one way around it. Servitors are absolute pants. Interceptor squads. Interceptors are nice. Always liked Interceptors. They've got their one shunt move now that can get them from one side of the table to the other side of the table. Beforehand it was about a 30-inch move. Now it's unlimited. You just pick them up, put them down 9 inches away from an enemy unit. Suddenly they shunt to the other side of the table, and there is a stratagem that you can bring for these guys, which I think it's called Enhanced Teleport, where because it's once a game ability. Once they've done it, they can't do it again. But with that stratagem, with the Enhanced Teleport or Teleport Boost or whatever it's called, that unit can do it again. And remember, in the next turn, if you really want to, you could play that stratagem again on the same unit and get them to jump again. So the one use game shunt that Interceptors do isn't one use anymore if you want to bring, if you want to spend that stratagem. Some stuff, like Purgation Squads, worth noting, don't have Teleport Strike, so the shooty ones do not teleport in. However, there is again another stratagem that you can buy, which gives units of infantry, the ability to teleport in. So if you want to drop a unit in with a bunch of side cannons and teleport them down onto the battlefield rather than start them at the back, you can now by spending a stratagem. We'll get to the stratagems. Nemesis and Dread Knights, baby carrier as the internet says. Land Raiders, Land Raiders and Land Raiders, Razorback Rhinos, and what's this? A Silver Stormhawk Interceptor for the army of the Grey Knights. It makes narrative sense to me that they have these. If they've got Storm Ravens and can fly in their narrative, they zoom in, they drop down, they teleport in all over the place. And the Storm Ravens should have some close air support as well. So Stormhawk Interceptors are there, and Storm Talon gunships are there. You've got to think about the number of demons that can fly as well. They would have access to flyers that can shoot them out of the sky, which is quite nice. They're not Psykers. They won't be smiting away. Neither is the Storm Raven. It's not a Smiker. Psyker. It won't be smiting away. But essentially, Chaplains, Storm Talons, and Stormhawks are your new entry if you're a Grey Knight player. Then we have the Armory. Then we have Scarbrand. Is that Scarbrand? Big dudes doing their things. And then we're into the Hammer of the Demons. Now, Brotherhood of Cycles is interesting because these are new rules that you can add to your army if your army is battlefield and includes only Grey Knights units. So capital Grey Knights using that keyword Grey Knights. So again, chapter keyword Grey Knights. For the Rifle Dread would work in this case because that's a keyword, you can tell it because it's in capitals. You get access to these if you bring a Battleforged army that only consists of Grey Knights. If you add some other stuff on it, you don't get these. And these are two new rules. This allows you to +1 to psychic tests and deny the witch result. So you're smiting on a 4, which is dirty. And Knights of Titan is objective secured. It applies to troops units. If there's any troops in range and of objective, they score it regardless of how many other enemy models are there, unless that unit also has objective secured or an equivalent rule. Defenders of Humanity in the case of Chaos, Defenders of Humanity in the case of Space Marines, and Despoilers of the Galaxy in the case of Chaos Space Marines, their new objective secured type rule. Then we have your Warlord traits, 6 Warlord traits to choose from instead of just 3. You have to give Drago, Demon Slayer, you have to give these guys these Warlord traits. So for example, Grandmaster Voldos has Lawmaster, which means your Warlord knows 1 additional psychic power from the Santic discipline. He knows 4 psychic powers. I particularly like this one. First to the fray. You can re-roll failed charge ranges for your Warlord and friendly Grey Knights that are within 6 inches of him at the start of the fight phase. So you're deep striking in with your Captain, with your Warlord, with whatever it is, Chaplain maybe, and that unit is charging in and the guys around him are charging in and re-rolling to charge. Deep striking in turn 1 with your Terminators, Chaplain in the middle, re-roll charge, your Chaplain goes in, re-roll charging. So yeah, the Alpha Strike of the Grey Knights suddenly got a bit more dirty. Drago's Warlord trait is this one. If your Warlord wounds a demon in the fight phase, you must subtract 1 from any invulnerable saves made against the attack. It's nice if you're fighting demons, but that is all it does. That's all Drago gets. It makes narrative sense. It sucks if you're playing something that isn't a demon, but does Drago really need a buff with his Titan sword doing 4 damage or -4? Let me check. Sorry, Drago's sword only does 3 damage a pop, but at -4 AP and at +4 strength. Typically hitting on 2s, re-rolling a hit because he's in range of himself. Typically wounding on 2s, anything with a strength value of 5 to 8, 5 to 7, he's wounding on 3s at -4 AP and 3 damage a pop. Drago, with his 5 attacks, can chuck out 15 damage in a turn if everything hits and anything wounds. He doesn't really need the buff with a Warlord trait. Hammer of Righteousness, add 1 to wound rolls for your Warlord. Unyielding Anvil, they become fearless within 6 inches of him. And Nemesis Lord, add 1 to the damage characteristics of your Warlord's melee weapons. If he wields a Relic of Titan, then as a melee weapon, then you've got to choose another Warlord trait instead. Remember, Warlord traits, you can just pick them. I can see first to the fray, re-roll in charge ranges for your Warlord and anything within 6 inches of him being a must-take, really. Stratagems. The Codex Space Marines had an extra page of stratagems. Grey Knights have less stratagems, as well as the main 3 that you get in the main rulebook, so reroll a dice, interrupt an assault, auto pass. They've got a couple that come straight out of the Space Marine Codex, such as Tactical Flexibility and Honor the Chapter. And there's a couple of Orbital Bombardment, which I tried in one of my battle reports. You may or may have not seen it, but it sucks, for 3 command points as well. But there's a couple of stratagems in here that come directly from the Space Marine Codex, just a couple. But some of them, or most of them, are unique to the Grey Knights, and I like these ones. They cost 2 command points each, which is a bit of a bum. But Psychic Onslaught. Basically, you use the stratagem, the strength and armor penetration of characteristics of any silencers, heavy side cannons increase by 1. So, for example, a P silencer is normally strength 4, AP 0, and its strength and AP goes up by 1, so it becomes strength 5, AP minus 1. Your side cannons go up even stronger. So side cannons, heavy side cannons will become strength 8, AP minus 2. Heavy side cannons do 2 damage, side cannons 1 damage. That's Psychic Onslaught. And look, Cybolt ammunition is back for all those who played Grey Knights back in 5th or 6th edition. I think it was 5th edition. And this does the same as that one. Any bolt weapons increase the strength and AP value by 1. So your Stormbolt has become strength 5, AP minus 1. Heavy Bolt has become strength 6, AP minus 2. It doesn't say anything about auto cannons though, because that was the thing, wasn't it, getting rifle dreads from strength 7 to strength 8. So it only does bolt weaponry. But I like the fact that both of these are back, increasing the bang for your buck when you fire stuff. A couple of other interesting things here. This is the same as the Space Marine ones. It allows you, for 1 command point you get an extra relic, for 3 command points you get an extra 2 relics. That's the teleportation boost for 1 command point that I mentioned with Interceptors. Anyone using the shunt rule, the deep strike one, the teleportarium is there. The really, really nasty one is this one, Heed the Procrastinators. 2 command points, use a stratagem, start your turn, pick a Grey Knight's character, like Drago for example, and add 1 to its invulnerable save throws. Drago's got a Storm Shield, spend 2 command points, Drago goes up to a 3-up invulnerable save. Or you could chuck it on your Terminators and they go up to a 4-up invulnerable save. We'll get to the psychic powers in a bit, but here's a dirty thing. Sanctuary is back. You cast it on something. It's a warp charge value of 6. It gives you a 5-up invulnerable save. On something that doesn't have an invulnerable save, it gets a 5-up. And if it already has an invulnerable save, it gets +1 to that. So for example, you could chuck out Sanctuary on your Terminators or onto your Dread Knight and give it a 4-up invulnerable save. Spend a 2-point stratagem to get to a 3-up invulnerable save. Or, dirty still, Dread Knight Grandmaster with a 4-up invulnerable save. Make him a 3-up invulnerable save with Sanctuary, and then give your Dread Knight a 2-up invulnerable save by chucking this stratagem out on him. Doesn't say anywhere they can't stack. This says just add 1 to their invulnerable save. This says just add 1 to their invulnerable save. So 1 plus 1 equals 2 on top of their invulnerable save. I like it. Say you really want to cast 1 more psychic power, spend a command point, a unit can cast 1 more psychic power than usual. If you want to take for 1 command point, use a stratagem when taking a psychic test for Grey Knight Psychers, roll 3 dice rather than 2, and pick the 2 highest rolls for psychic challenge. 3 dice, pick the 2 highest. That'll come in handy when you cast Vortex of Doom, because Vortex of Doom is a warp charge 8, but it's mean. Warp charge 8 is pick a enemy model within 12 inches, and everything within 3 inches of that model suffers D3 mortal wounds, including that model. That model's unit and every other unit within 3 inches of that model. So if it's a single model, such as a Rhino, or a vehicle, and you go boom, D3 mortal wounds on that vehicle. If there are other units within 3 inches of that model, and a footprint of a Rhino or a Land Raider or an enemy vehicle is quite big, then other units within 3 inches of that suffer D3 mortal wounds as well. Nasty. Particularly if you're rolling 3 dice and picking the highest. So what we've got here is access to Grey Knight psychic shenanigans going on, and some ways that they can buff each other, and some ways for non-teleport units to get in there, some ways for your interceptors to shoot up the table, do some damage, and then shoot back again should they need to. You've got objectives secured on your troops units with the Knights of Titan rule, and remember troops in here can be Terminators, can be just Grey Knight Terminators. So some nice stratagems to have a shake a stick out here. Then we go on to the relics. Again, in the Space Marine Codex, there's 2 pages of relics, but some of them are specific. Half of the page in the Space Marine Codex is only for one for an Ultramarine, one for a Salamander, one for an Iron Hands, and then the other half of the page was ones that you could put on anyone. So it makes sense that they only have 6 here, and there's some very interesting. There's a new bolter, new Nemesis hammer, new halberd. So if he's modelled with a storm bolter or a halberd or a hammer, then you can do more damage here. The banner you stick on an ancient, and instead of the ancient loses rights of banishment, but when he does smite, it's only 6-inch range, but it does D6 mortal wounds instead of D3. Grey Knights only do D1. But anyway, this banner means anyone within 6 inches of your ancient is getting D6 mortal wounds every time, regardless of whether you roll a 10 or more than 10. Curious Sacrifice gives you a 5-up feel no pain. This one's going to be coming a lot. Say you bring in a standard brother captain, or you're more likely to be bringing in a librarian or a chaplain and teleporting them in and giving them first to the fray, so they're right in the front lines and the units around them can re-roll their charge ranges. Then you're probably going to give that unnamed guy the Curious Sacrifice, which gives him a 5-up feel no pain. So he'll have his 4-up Crozier save in the librarian, a 5-up. If he's a brother captain, he'll be having a 4-up. But basically he's got an invulnerable save on top of his Terminator save and a 5-up feel no pain. And you can buff his invulnerable save with Sanctuary, and you can buff it even further with a stratagem if you want to. So as for psychic powers, the Purge Soul Gate of Infinity Hammer Hand is still the same. We've mentioned Sanctuary, we've mentioned Vortex of Doom, and Astral Aim allows you to shoot at stuff that you can't see. And you also ignore the benefits of cover when firing at that unit. And then after that, we have all the points values for the Grey Knight stuff that end. Okay, so that's my review of Codex Grey Knights. You don't get any Primaris Marines in here, but honestly, I didn't think you would. Does it fit the narrative to have Primaris Marines in a chapter that's the most secret of secret chapters, that most other chapters have no idea exists whatsoever? It doesn't make sense to me, but I would have liked to have seen them with some kind of new models. Maybe another sprue for the Dread Knight, so you got a Dread Knight with a shield. Wouldn't it look cool if a Dread Knight was striding forward with a big shield in front of him and having a 3-up invulnerable save and some sort of missile rack on his shoulders? It could have taken the sprue and they could have chucked that in there. Some of the new Legio Custodes, some of the ones from Forge World, those new Dread Knights with the swords and shields look really, really cool for the Custodes. I would have liked to have seen something. Instead, what we get is some new flyers. We get the Chaplain entry and we get some flavour. I have to say that the most flavour that there was in the Grey Knight Codex was the very first standalone codex that they got, with the Inquisitors in it and Cotias and their henchmen. The last couple, or the last one, has been a bit underwhelming. This one's better, in my humble opinion. I think the stratagems work well when combined with some of their psychic powers. I think some of the combinations we're going to see some seasoned Grey Knight players pull off is going to be very interesting. It certainly gives you the ability to make an even more of an Alpha Strike Grey Knight force. So yeah, that's it. It's interesting. It's not as good as I would have hoped, but it's much better than I feared. And I've got a Grey Knight army. You don't see it very often on the channel because normally when Grey Knights fight, it's normally Mike bringing them, and I don't want to flood the channel with Grey Knights. I can see myself going out and getting a few more models and playing solely some of the Grey Knight forces and trying to stack up some of these stratagems together. If you use keyword Imperium and join these with other forces, you're going to lose that objective secured rule and their ability to deny and cast psychic powers on +1. But you still have access to their stratagems, you'll still have access to their relics. So there you go. That's it for Codex Grey Knights. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you like what I do and want to support me, please check out Winter's SEO On Demand subscription channel. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Happy wargaming.